Welcome to Building People, Companies, and Careers, brought to you by AccruePartners. I'm Amy Pack.
And I'm Patty Comer. We're your host on this journey through the vibrant business landscape in the Queen City.
This podcast is an extension of our mission statement at AccruePartners, where we have spent over 20 years fostering connections and building relationships.
Whether you're a client, candidate, or business influencer in Charlotte, this podcast is for you.
We are immensely grateful for your support throughout our journey, and now through this podcast, we're excited to share the stories that have defined our path.
So let's dive in.
Let's do it.
Welcome back to Building People, Companies, and Careers, brought to you by AccruePartners. I'm your host, Ben Brandon. Here at Accrue, we're passionate about connecting with clients, candidates, consultants, and thought leaders who are shaping the business landscape, not just here in Charlotte, but across the Carolinas. Today, we're thrilled to have special guests joining us, Nathan Sloan, principal at Deloitte. Nathan, we're so glad to have you here and excited to dive into your perspective in today's HR trends, talent strategy, and how organizations can prepare for what's next in the world of work. We always like to start off with the typical interview question. Tell me about yourself.
Well, Ben, first of all, happy to be here. I know we have a tremendous partnership, so appreciate the invitation back. As you mentioned, I am a principal at Deloitte, which means we wear lots of different hats, right? So technically, I'm in our human capital consulting practice, one of the leaders there. I do serve clients in this space around human capital consulting, but then also internally, I have a role in helping us figure out how we look at talent management horizontally within the practice. So we have P&L owners that are vertical within the practice, and when we deploy professionals to different projects, we look at the skills that they have versus where they sit. And so part of my role is to help us figure out how do we continue to test that and pilot that within the firm. So again, happy to be here.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I know a lot of organizations are thinking about their workforce differently and talent and kind of the intersection of technology and human capital. So let's dive into it. Everyone's talking about AI, transforming the workplace. From what you see, what are leaders getting wrong about it, and what should they be paying attention to instead?
Well, it's definitely a hot topic, right? Everybody wants to know the impact of AI on the workforce and their organizations. Honestly, I think the biggest challenge that companies have is they get stuck in this notion of pilot-itis, right? They're just trying to run a bunch of different pilots. There's not a lot of control. Now, you got to strike the balance between driving that innovation and allowing that to happen. But the real opportunity is understanding how is it actually going to impact how work is designed. And so, there's absolutely pressures from external stakeholders, shareholders to say, show me how AI is going to improve the bottom line, right? How many people can we get rid of based on how AI is disrupting the work? And what we've seen to be more powerful is to truly understand how AI plus the work can actually help people get better and how it's incremental in terms of the work that they're doing. So sitting there and just demanding more from people is going to create more stress in the system, right? It's going to potentially create mistrust, right, with your employees. And it's going to lead to burnout, right, and potentially disengagement. So yes, we need to find a way to balance like I said, the support for innovation and trying AI, but being very intentional. And HR has absolutely a big role to play in that too. You think about some of the software engineers that are out there, and these AI companies will deploy these forward deployed engineers, right? So they'll land somebody at a client and help them solve a problem, right, with the software and the AI technology. HR has an opportunity to do something similar with kind of work design engineers and understanding how the work is going to shift in the face of AI. So a big opportunity for sure.
Absolutely. That's super interesting. I mean, we hear from our clients, everyone's very interested in obviously using AI, deploying AI, finding the best use case to make a big impact and obviously point to the ROI. I think that's been a little bit slower for people to be able to point directly to the ROI early on.
Yep.
But even just at a smaller company like AccruePartners, kind of seeing where we've come in our usage of AI from when we first started to now, it's moving so fast. So I feel like you have to know what's going on out there. You have to be deploying it in certain areas and making the investment for sure.
Yeah, and I guess one thing I'd add to that, Ben, too, is we've seen more uptake as well. If you encourage employees to try to figure out how they can incorporate AI into their daily work, right? Just experiment a little bit in helping you do certain tasks that you would normally do manually, right? And so to drive this early adopter mindset, because part of it too is helping our leaders understand where the opportunities are and encouraging that with their employees.
Right. When roles and skills are changing faster than most planning cycles, how does workforce planning need to change at the executive level?
Well, we were just having this conversation internally yesterday, and what I would say is historically we've still seen many companies treating workforce planning as more just current state or backwards looking operations or headcount planning. And so strategic workforce planning is actually thinking about not just headcount planning, but looking at capabilities and work. And in fact, there's an opportunity to even look at agents, right? How do you workforce plan for agents? And people aren't thinking about that today. So there's a huge opportunity there as well.
Yeah. I think it came up in our last HR Power Breakfast. A guy that we've known for quite some time was talking about AI agents. That was the first time I'd heard about it. That was almost a year ago. And now I've heard a lot of companies talking about how they're investing in that.
Yeah, and I think the other piece too is a lot of organizations will just focus internally on the data that they have, and the world is moving so fast, right? Skills are changing, capabilities are changing so fast. There's a need to keep up with that, but there's also a need to ingest some external data, right? So there are platforms out there that can help sense, right, what is hot in the market, what skills people are hiring for. And so being able to factor that into your planning is key as well.
Any certain platforms that
it's hard for I would love
success.
To advocate for a few. We have so many amazing alliance partners, right?
Yeah.
And so what I would say is some of the partners that we have that are typically focused on like org design and org visualization have moved more into the workforce planning capabilities. And so tying those two pieces together is important instead of just staring at org charts, essentially.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. And this kind of goes back to a little bit about what we were talking about a second ago, but AI is supposed to make us more productive, but often just raises expectations. How can leaders actually help teams prioritize instead of piling more on?
Yeah, I think, we touched on this a little bit at the beginning. There's such a initial expectation of, well, I'm just going to demand more, right? Because you have the availability of AI tools and you should be able to be doing work faster or be doing more with less. And so, a lot of the pinch point ends up being with managers, right? And so we've seen a lot of companies focus on building manager capability and making sure that leaders understand their role around driving realistic expectations, but then also integrating AI into the work that they're doing as well.
Yeah.
And to be honest, a lot of this comes down to how you're organizing the work and putting people on stretch assignments and giving them the opportunities to develop as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a little bit of a learning curve of how to adopt AI into your day-to-day, and then how does your role evolve? Because, if you're kind of more of on a transactional level, like you're used to hitting a certain number, there might not be a greater number to hit, but the role can evolve. Maybe there's some more analysis on what you're processing or what you're doing or what you're building decks or whatever it might be. So,
well, and I think there's also a natural inclination to, like I said, just pile more on and ask people what they can do more of. Another important piece is to kind of create a list of things that you can stop, things that we don't need to do anymore. And a lot of times, managers and employees gloss over that. They just say, well, here's what else I can do. Here's some of the other things on my to-do list versus here are the things I need to pause and stop and I can do better in the future as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Something that I've heard recently is about talent, athleticism, and adaptability. What does that really look like day to day, and how do companies build it without burning people out?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely if you think about the term, athlete, right? And we take this strategy at Deloitte as well, as where we hire kind of best athletes, if you will. And a lot of that comes down to those who can truly adapt their skills. They understand how to frame a problem, solve a problem. So it comes back to some of those core human skills, right? And judgment. And then it's also setting appropriate and realistic guardrails for how people are going to be mobile within the organization. So, and in fact, it could even show up in performance management. In fact, I know some of our clients have been thinking about, well, how do you measure performance that is based a little bit more on the ability for people to be agile, for them to focus on self-development, instead of being asked to go and do something? Are they taking the initiative to truly understand how their skills need to adapt based on how the work is changing and how teams are forming, and then they take that upon themselves to upskill, right, whether it be internally or externally within an organization. But and if you think about, again, this analogy with sports, right, and talent, athleticism, we're not constantly running a sprint, right, 24/7. So this notion, I think, applies here in organizations too, where you have to train, you have to perform, and then ultimately you need to recover. And so thinking about how you can intentionally do all three of those things throughout the day, throughout the week, it really will give you sustainability in terms of, the talent. It will drive engagement. It can drive retention as well. Yeah.
I think that's a really good nugget for candidates and clients that might be tuning in. I think this is going to have to be embedded in the interview process. How do you uncover that someone can adapt in an environment where there's changes happening, maybe more unstructured, not so defined as what their job's going to look like, because AI might change their job, the job that they're interviewing, it might change it very soon. So
Absolutely.
How do clients form questions to ensure that talent aligns, and how do candidates, develop stories and experience of how they can adapt to changes in the workforce, whether it be, systems, technology, scope of work. So,
And I think a good summary point here too is adaptability does not mean that you need to be exhausted all the time, right? Because I think there's many times an interpretation of, oh, you're constantly asking for me to adapt or learn new skills. Well, then, 6 months, a year later, you're just exhausted because you don't know where the expectations are. And so you need to maintain, right, a good schedule and approach around how you're creating that plan for yourself.
A lot of companies say they're becoming skills based.
Yep.
I even had a client a few years ago, pretty big company located here in Charlotte. I was talking to somebody that was going through this same exercise, and it seemed like, obviously a heavy lift. But in your experience, what tells you a company is serious versus just changing the labels?
Yeah, a lot of our clients have focused on building a skills inventory, right? They may invest in the technology and the platform, but it's not actually driving decisions within the organization. And so the skills-based organization construct in my mind, in our mind, is really more of a system-based approach, right? And so if you're truly embedding it into hiring, learning, performance management, we talked about earlier, like workforce planning as well, then they're really serious about it. And it also, as I mentioned earlier as well, it drives mobility, right, within the organization too.
Yeah. Well, and I think especially a company that might have, maybe they're a retailer, they have 1,000 locations across the country. There could be some people in that organization that are either underemployed, but they might be high performing in their job. I think going towards this skills-based organization and building out that inventory helps them retain and promote talent that could be really good at corporate headquarters or in a new elevated role. So I see
and
the
to that,
demand.
and to that point, whether it be retailers or similar organizations, many are looking at skills as hiring or promotion criteria. You may not even need to have a 4-year degree, right, to be good at a specific job. And so focusing very much on the skills required to get the work done is starting to get embedded into some of those other processes as well.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating concept. And like I said, this was a really big company here in Charlotte kind of going through this process or transforming to more of a skills-based organization. And I'm interested to see that trickle down and see more mid-market or smaller companies hopefully take that journey too and kind of see it really play out within the organization. But I think it's a great way to retain talent and level people up that have the skills and capabilities.
And if you can think about your talent and the ecosystem of talent within the organization as a true marketplace, right? And it can be internal or external versus just a framework or taxonomy of skills.
Right.
And then, as I mentioned, right, starting to embed it in even things like learning in the flow of work, right? While you're on the job in certain processes, rewarding people based on skills acquisition. So embedding it in the talent lifecycle says a lot.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about AI.
We talked a lot about AI.
We have talked a lot about AI. Obviously, it's transforming the work, how we get work done, what we're capable of doing. It also comes into play in hiring. AI is playing a bigger role in hiring, from screening to assessments. Where does it genuinely add value, and where do humans still need to be firmly in the loop?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you think about the HR related processes, I would say AI was really first used in hiring, right? As you think about some of the manual tasks and summarizing notes and looking at candidate interviews and summarizing that for hiring managers. And there's really a maturity model, if you will, across the AI and hiring landscape, of AI assisted to AI augmented to truly driving decisions. And that's where the real opportunity is for humans still to be the ones accountable for making certain decisions, and AI can help assist them with that.
We do a IT power breakfast as well, and CIO made a comment that's really stuck with me, and she said, AI is kind of the new sexy term that's being used to get projects funded. In kind of looking at how our clients are using AI, there's a part of me that sees, I see some companies using AI tools where they were developed for maybe going out and finding your light industrial or field employees.
Yep.
But the way it's being sold internally is that it's AI being used for all corporate functions. And the business is telling me they might not be getting the candidate flow that they expect. They've already invested in this tool, so talent acquisition and HR is saying, hold on, we can't necessarily go outside. We have to use this tool. And there's some misalignment with like how sometimes AI is being applied, especially when it comes to hiring. Do you have any thoughts on that? Or I'm sure you all are helping clients and advising them and helping them navigate these situations. But I'm just worried about some companies that might be misapplying their tools.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair trap that a lot of companies still fall into, right? Depending on who's making the decision around procuring certain technology tools and where AI is going to support some of those processes. And so breaking down the real process flow to understand where it can add value and where it can actually harm things is going to be important. And hiring, if you think about the candidate experience, it may not be positive if they're interacting with AI versus an individual. So considering that is important as well.
Yeah. If you were advising a CEO right now what's the single most important workforce capability they need to invest in over the next few years to stay competitive?
That's $1 million question, doesn't it? Yeah, I think it goes back to what we were talking about originally around there's been so much focus on just running these various AI pilots, but they're not truly thinking about how the work needs to shift and how it needs to be redesigned. And so working with functional leaders to help them understand their role and actually redesigning the work, I would say would be priority number one. Easier said than done, of course, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of organizations don't have that capability internally. And as I mentioned, I think this is a big opportunity for HR to step up and say, okay, we may have helped you create a specific job architecture. We can do job design. Now let's take it down to the next level and talk about the work design itself and how it needs to be redesigned.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that we've heard too is there's a lot of companies trying to figure out, well, what jobs is AI going to replace, right? Are we going to need to hire junior staff in the future?
Right.
And maybe that's the case. Maybe that's not the case in certain industries. But if you're not going to hire as many entry-level positions or junior staff, how do you fill that experience gap, right? And so how do you develop people? And are you going to hire directly into a manager role, right? How do you develop some of those leadership capabilities and understand the culture of the organization? And so I would caution organizations to say, hey, we don't need to hire junior people anymore in the future.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. I too started my career in public accounting, and I first said that when I saw a lot of stuff being outsourced to their global delivery center, knew that it was a need from all the cost pressures that were happening, especially in audit. But as more and more of the first year staff work got outsourced, I started asking, how do you become a second year associate if you don't do the first year associate stuff? And I think obviously the big four have incredible resources and training programs. I think that's why you guys attract the great people that you do. Such a great place to start a career. But I think that resonates that we have to train the talent for the current jobs, as well as what jobs will come of like all of this the AI and I read something the other day that there's like 100 new jobs that's going to come from AI.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of fascinating to look at because none of those jobs are jobs that we recruit on today. So
they may not even exist today, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is the real opportunity. And even as we think about our professional services business, right, it's going to unlock more opportunities for us to help clients and think about the poor students who are in college right now, right? And how do we continue to communicate that it's valuable for them to join us?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Nathan, this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you for joining us on building people, companies, and careers, and for sharing such thoughtful, real-world perspectives on where work, talent, and leadership are where it's headed. We got a little plug because Nathan and I are going to be back together here on the 26th of February. But just want to give a quick plug. I'm excited about our 2026 HR Power Breakfast partnership between AccruePartners and Deloitte. Nathan will be back as our moderator. We'll have a fantastic panel featuring Meredith Mons, CHRO at Scout Motors, Anna O'Mara, CHRO at Miller Environmental Group, Andy, SVP and Head of Talent and Employee Experience at Lincoln Financial. Andy, I'll get your last name right during the Power Breakfast. And then Corey Pollan, Head of Employment Law Team at CRC Group. It's going to be a dynamic, candid conversation with leaders who are in the arena every day, navigating the same challenges we've been talking about today. This will be Nathan's third time joining, so we certainly appreciate the partnership, and we already have enough attendees that we're going to rent the space upstairs, so we'll be in a new space. But Nathan, thanks again for the insights, the energy, the perspective, and everyone listening. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Building People, Companies, and Careers.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.